annals of American criminal history. Few figures are as infamous and chilling as John Wayne Gacy, a man whose terrifying legacy lives on through the horrors he committed. Known as the Killer Clown, Gacy's brutal crimes captivated the world in the late 1970s, making headlines for their sheer horror and the extent of his depravity. Responsible for the deaths of at least 33 young men and boys, Gacy's story is one of deception, manipulation, and an unfathomable descent into madness. For most of his life, Gacy was a respected member of his community. He was a businessman, a volunteer, and even a well-liked figure at children's parties where he performed as Pogo the Clown. He hid behind a carefully crafted facade of normalcy, gaining trust and affection from those around him. But beneath this seemingly perfect exterior was a monstrous predator. His killings, which ranged from kidnapping and torture to rape and murder, took place under the noses of his neighbors and family. This duality of Gacy's life, the man who was adored by the public and the monster he truly was, forms the heart of one of the most chilling true crime cases in history. The story of John Wayne Gacy not only demonstrates the horrifying reality of serial killings, but also serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked trust and the importance of seeing beyond the surface. In this video, we will delve into the details of Gacy's life, the gruesome murders he committed, and the legacy of fear and fascination he left behind. Through this exploration, we will uncover how a seemingly ordinary man could transform into one of the most notorious killers of the 20th century. Part 1. The Dual Life of John Wayne Gacy. From pillar of the community to killer clown of facade. Of normal cyber on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, John Wayne Gacy had a childhood marked by instability and trauma. He was the second of 3 children, born into a working-class family. His father, John Gacy Sr., was an abusive alcoholic, and his mother, Marion, was known to be a kind but passive woman. John Wayne Gacy's early life was defined by a tense home environment where physical and emotional abuse were commonplace. His father often belittled and humiliated him, and Gacy himself struggled with his self-image, particularly in his teenage years when he began to show signs of mental and emotional distress. In his youth, Gacy was a highly self-conscious and insecure child, often feeling overshadowed by his more accomplished older brother. Despite this, he went on to graduate high school in 1960. However, his early adulthood was marred by a series of failed marriages and personal troubles. In the 1960s, Gacy relocated to Las Vegas and then to Chicago, where he started working as a manager at a local Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC franchise. During this period, he began to develop the personality and outward persona that would later help him conceal his true nature. Gacy was a charming and likable man, able to make people trust him easily. In the late 1960s, he married Marlon Myers, and they had 2 children. On the surface, Gacy appeared to have everything: a loving wife, children, a steady job, and a stable home. His reputation as a well-liked, successful businessman grew. Gacy became involved in local politics and social activities, even befriending influential figures in Chicago. At the same time, he secretly began participating in sinister activities that were far from the public eye. One of the most disturbing aspects of Gacy's dual life was his role as Pogo the Clown. In the early 1970s, he began dressing up as a clown for children's parties and charity events. Gacy's clown persona was an integral part of his public identity, adding an eerie layer to his already unsettling nature. Pogo was not just a party clown, he was a performer who gained attention and affection from his audiences. It is chilling to think that Gacy, a man who was responsible for the most horrifying crimes imaginable, was also the man children laughed at and adored. This stark contrast between his public life and private actions would eventually unravel, revealing the true horror of Gacy's crimes. The emergence of the killer clown. Despite his outward success and public image, cracks were beginning to show in Gacy's life. His marriage to Marlon deteriorated in the early 1970s due to his increasing control over her, his violent tendencies, and his increasing interest in younger men. In 1976, the couple divorced, and Gacy's life began to take a darker turn. He moved to a new house at 8213 W. Somerdale Avenue in Norwood Park, a suburban neighborhood in Chicago, which would become the site of his most notorious crimes. It was at this house that Gacy's sadistic urges would escalate into something far more terrifying. During this period, he became obsessed with young men. He lured them with promises of work, money, or companionship, often offering them drugs and alcohol. He would then torture, rape, and ultimately murder his victims, often choking them with a rope or using a tourniquet to strangle them. Once the victims were dead, Gacy would hide their bodies in a crawl space under his house or dump them in nearby rivers. The true extent of Gacy's horrific actions was not immediately known. For years, he lived his life without suspicion, continuing to serve as a civic volunteer and attending neighborhood functions. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, he was taking the lives of young men and boys. Gacy's ability to compartmentalize his life to present himself as a respected, friendly figure while committing unspeakable acts of violence was one of the most chilling aspects of his persona. As Gacy's murder spree continued, the police remained unaware of his activities. His first known victim was 15-year-old Timothy McCoy, who was killed in 1972. Over the next few years, Gacy would go on to murder at least 33 victims, some of whom he would sexually assault and abuse before killing them. Gacy's modus operandi was chillingly consistent. He would engage with his victims, build their trust, and then turn on them with terrifying cruelty. Many of Gacy's victims were teenagers or young men who were either runaways or came from troubled backgrounds. Some were lured to his home with promises of work, while others were abducted while simply walking down the street. Gacy often referred to them as garbage, an indication of how he viewed his victims as disposable objects. The final act, a killer Gacy's killing spree, would not have come to light without the investigation of one key missing person, Robert Piest, a 15-year-old boy who disappeared in December 1978. Piest had been planning to meet with Gacy to discuss a potential job, but he vanished without a trace. His mother, concerned for his safety, reported his disappearance to the police. This would lead investigators to Gacy, who at first denied any involvement in Piest's disappearance. However, after a search of his home, the authorities found disturbing evidence that led to his arrest. The most damning evidence was the discovery of human remains buried beneath Gacy's house. Over the next few months, more bodies were uncovered, leading to the grim realization that John Wayne Gacy was not just a killer, but one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. In December 1978, Gacy was arrested and later confessed to the murders. His confession was chilling in its detail, recounting the ways he had lured, tortured, and killed his victims. Gacy was convicted of 33 murders, and in 1980, he was sentenced to death. His trial and subsequent conviction shocked the nation, and Gacy became a symbol of the evil that can lurk behind seemingly ordinary facades. John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994, but his legacy of terror continues to haunt America to this day. His ability to live a double life as a beloved community figure and a brutal killer has made him one of the most disturbing and infamous figures in true crime history. Conclusion: the chilling legacy of Gacy's story of John Wayne Gacy is a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Gacy was able to maintain a perfect facade of normalcy while committing horrific acts of violence that left a permanent scar on American history. His case serves as a stark warning about the dangers of blind trust and the need to be vigilant in our communities. Gacy's horrific actions not only led to the deaths of 33 young men, but also raised important questions about the role of society in recognizing and addressing the darker impulses within individuals. It also prompted a reevaluation of how the criminal justice system handles cases of serial killing and the need for better identification and prevention of such crimes. As we reflect on Gacy's crimes, we must remember the victims, the young men whose lives were stolen by a man who was able to manipulate, charm, and deceive his way into their trust. Their stories are as important as the man who took them, and it is through remembering them that we can learn the vital lessons of vigilance, awareness, and justice. Call to action: if you found this story chilling and want to explore more true crime cases, subscribe to our channel for more in-depth investigations into the darkest corners of criminal history. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think made Gacy's crime so particularly horrific, and how can we better protect our communities from individuals like him? Part 2. The murders unfold. Gacy's descent into darkness. First victim, Timothy McCoy. It all started in 1972, when Gacy's first known victim, 15-year-old Timothy McCoy, met a grim fate. McCoy was traveling from Michigan to Chicago to visit his brother. During his stay, he came into contact with Gacy, who offered him a ride. Gacy, a seemingly kind and helpful man, invited McCoy into his home, and it was here that the first act of brutal violence took place. Timothy McCoy was lured into Gacy's trap with a simple gesture of kindness. However, the reality of what awaited him was far from what he expected. After inviting McCoy inside, Gacy allegedly killed him in the middle of the night by stabbing him. McCoy's body was disposed of by Gacy in a chillingly calculated manner. It was buried beneath the floorboards of his house, a horrifying foreshadowing of what would come to follow. This murder would mark the beginning of a chilling and methodical killing spree. While the exact number of victims in this early phase remains unclear, Gacy's modus operandi quickly evolved and became disturbingly consistent, luring young men, particularly those who were vulnerable or marginalized, and using manipulation and violence to imprison them before killing them. The creeping pattern the victim's vulnerabilities in the years following McCoy's murder. Gacy's killing spree continued, and his pattern became clearer. Most of his victims were young men and boys, many of whom were vulnerable due to their socioeconomic status or personal circumstances. Gacy targeted individuals who were less likely to be missed by society, often picking up young runaways or those searching for work. Gacy's victims were often led to believe that they were simply meat in a kind stranger who would offer them a job or an opportunity. Once the victims were lured into his home, however, the true horror would begin. Gacy's house, particularly the space under the floorboards and crawl space, became a macabre tomb for his victims. The house itself was built in such a way that it concealed the atrocities taking place within. The floors would be dug up or disturbed in areas where bodies could be hidden, and some victims were even buried in shallow graves in the backyard or discarded in nearby rivers. Gacy's choice of victims reflected the very nature of his crimes. They were often marginalized, isolated, and vulnerable, and Gacy knew that his victims would have little support or recognition in their absence. His ability to deceive and manipulate was evident. He charmed his victims into a false sense of safety before revealing his true intentions. It wasn't just the murders themselves that were horrifying, but the emotional and psychological manipulation Gacy subjected his victims to. The trick of the handcuff trick, one of Gacy's most notorious methods of gaining control over his victims, was by using what he referred to as the handcuff trick. Gacy would ask his victims to trust him by allowing him to demonstrate how he could quickly and easily cuff and uncuff them. In his words, this harmless trick was an icebreaker, allowing him to bond with the victim once the handcuffs were locked on the victim's wrists. Gacy would often mock them, tightening the cuffs and demonstrating his dominance, but this trick was anything but harmless. Once a victim was restrained, Gacy would torture them, often sexually assaulting them before strangling them to death. Many of his victims died from asphyxiation, as Gacy would use a rope or cloth to strangle them. Others were brutally beaten or subjected to other forms of cruelty. The final indignity often came after death, when Gacy would discard their bodies, as if they were nothing more than refused. As his methods became more refined, Gacy's thirst for violence and control grew more intense. He would often keep his victims' remains for long periods, engaging in what can only be described as a macabre form of souvenir hunting. He took pleasure not only in the act of murder, but also in the idea that he could keep a part of his victims for himself, almost as trophies of his power and dominance. The growing toll a neighborhood unaware. What's even more disturbing is that throughout this entire period of violence, Gacy maintained a facade of normalcy in his neighborhood. He remained involved in local politics and charity events. He even managed to charm those around him with his wit and charisma. He was seen as an upstanding member of his community, known for his involvement in local social events and for being generous to children's hospitals and fundraisers. At the same time, Gacy worked as a contractor, running his own business, PDM Contractors. He hired several young men, offering them work opportunities, many of whom would become his next victims. His connections to the community allowed him to hide in plain sight, making it more difficult for anyone to suspect his true nature. The chilling irony of Gacy's dual life, being a beloved local figure while concealing his monstrous actions behind closed doors, was not lost on investigators. Once the truth began to surface, while Gacy's neighbors were unaware of the horrors taking place just yards from their homes, there were subtle clues that something was amiss. For instance, neighbors often reported a strange odor coming from Gacy's home. However, Gacy was quick to dismiss any suspicions, blaming the smell on plumbing problems or trash. His ability to cover up his crimes, both physically and psychologically, allowed him to continue his reign of terror undisturbed for years. The clue that would lead to his capture, Robert Pius' disappearance. The pivotal moment that would eventually lead to Gacy's capture came in 1978, when 15-year-old Robert Pius disappeared. Robert was last seen leaving work at a pharmacy in the Chicago area. Before vanishing, Robert had mentioned meeting a man named John Gacy, who had promised him a job. Robert's disappearance set off a chain of events that would soon uncover Gacy's horrifying double life. Unlike many of Gacy's other victims, Robert had a family that was deeply concerned about his whereabouts. His mother immediately reported him missing, and his disappearance quickly garnered attention from the authorities. Investigators started tracing Robert's last known movements and came across Gacy's name. Gacy initially denied having any connection to Robert, but eventually became the prime suspect in the case. The evidence against him started to mount as investigators delved deeper into his background and activities. The unraveling from deception to arrest. As the investigation continued, the police began to piece together the horrifying truth about John Wayne Gacy. His charming persona, his involvement in local events, and his seemingly normal life were all a ruse. Gacy had meticulously concealed his dark side, but the discovery of Robert Pius' body along with the mounting evidence of his other crimes, would lead to his ultimate downfall. In December 1978, a search of Gacy's home uncovered shocking and horrifying evidence. Police found the bodies of his victims, some of them hidden in the crawl space beneath his house, others discarded in nearby rivers. The gruesome discovery led to Gacy's arrest, and his confession soon followed. In a chilling and disturbing moment, Gacy admitted to killing at least 33 young men and boys. His arrest marked the beginning of a dark chapter in American criminal history. The case, which would later be dubbed the Killer Clown Murders, shocked the nation and exposed the depths of Gacy's depravity. Conclusion: the monster behind the masked story of John Wayne Gacy is not only a true crime tale of terror, but a reminder of how deception and charm can mask the darkest of intentions. Gacy's ability to hide in plain sight for so long is both chilling and a testament to the dangers of not questioning appearances. While he was revered as a clown, he was, in reality, a monster. Gacy's crimes left a permanent scar on American society, and his case serves as a reminder of the fragility of human trust and the importance of vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable members of society. Part 3. The investigation, unmasking the killer clown's discovery of the bodies. The investigation into John Wayne Gacy took a dramatic turn after the disappearance of Robert Piest. The missing teenager's case would lead police directly to Gacy, but it was not until authorities entered his home that the chilling extent of his crimes was fully realized. Gacy had carefully maintained the illusion of normalcy, but inside his home, evidence of his monstrous acts lay hidden beneath the floorboards and buried in the backyard. The first major break in the case came when police executed a search warrant on Gacy's home on December 13, 1978. What they discovered was nothing short of horrifying. Underneath Gacy's house, in the crawl space, police uncovered the bodies of several young men. The bodies were in various states of decomposition, but they all bore signs of foul play, had been strangled with a piece of cloth or a rope, and many had been sexually assaulted. In addition to the bodies buried in the crawl space, investigators also found more human remains in the garage and under the floorboards. A total of 26 victims would eventually be uncovered at Gacy's home. These discoveries were a shocking revelation. What had been suspected to be the actions of a single killer were now confirmed, and the chilling reality set in that John Wayne Gacy had killed 33 individuals in the span of just a few years. Beyond the immediate shock of discovering the bodies, investigators also began to piece together the methods Gacy used to lure his victims into his home. Many of his victims had been lured under the pretense of work, money, or companionship. Gacy used his charm and his facade as a successful businessman and well-known community member to gain the trust of his victims, many of whom were young men living on the fringes of society. Gacy's confession, a chilling account in police custody. Gacy was interrogated extensively. Initially, he denied any involvement in the murders, but as the evidence mounted and his home became a crime scene, his facade began to crack. Eventually, Gacy confessed to the murders, detailing his gruesome crimes in chilling detail. He admitted to luring his victims to his house, where he would restrain them using handcuffs before sexually assaulting and killing them. The most chilling part of his confession was the cold, emotionless way in which Gacy spoke about the murders. He revealed that, over time, he had developed a routine for his killings. The victims were often subjected to a handcuff trick, where Gacy would invite them to put on handcuffs, promising that he could easily free them afterward. Once they were restrained, he would overpower them, torture them, and eventually strangle them to death. Gacy explained that after killing his victims, he would dispose of their bodies in different ways. Some were buried beneath his house, while others were discarded in nearby rivers. He described how he would sometimes engage in necrophilic acts before disposing of the bodies, adding to the grotesque nature of his crimes. In his confession, Gacy also revealed that his killing spree had started in the early 1970s, with the first victim being Timothy McCoy. Gacy's account of his motives for murder varied, but he described an internal need to kill, something that seemed to have become compulsive for him. As he gained confidence in his ability to deceive the authorities and his community, one particularly disturbing aspect of Gacy's confession was the complete lack of remorse. Even as he admitted to having taken the lives of 33 people, he showed no emotional distress or signs of guilt. Gacy's cold, calculated demeanor during his confession painted a picture of a man who had become detached from humanity, consumed by his own depravity. The psychological profile of John Wayne Gacy's cold and calculated nature prompted psychologists and criminal experts to delve into his psyche to understand what led him to commit such horrific crimes. Gacy's upbringing and early experiences likely played a key role in shaping the man who would later become known as the Killer Clown. His father's abusive behavior and constant belittling had a profound impact on Gacy's sense of self-worth, and many experts believe that Gacy harbored deep resentment toward his father, which he may have projected onto his victims later in life. Additionally, Gacy's sexual orientation and desires may have played a significant role in his crimes. Throughout his life, Gacy had been forced to hide his homosexuality, which may have contributed to his feelings of shame and confusion. Many psychologists speculate that Gacy sought to dominate and control his victims as a way of compensating for the lack of control he felt in his personal life. His power over his victims, through the act of abduction and murder, gave him a sense of dominance that he likely craved throughout his life. The duality of Gacy's public persona, beloved clown and community figure, paired with his violent and deviant behavior, highlights the complexities of his psychological profile. His ability to compartmentalize his life allowed him to deceive those around him, while continuing to satisfy his need for violence. Gacy's charm, confidence, and willingness to exploit his status in society made it easy for him to hide in plain sight for years. Psychological evaluations conducted during Gacy's trial concluded that while he showed no remorse for his actions, he was not considered legally insane. Gacy's ability to carry out his killings methodically and without emotional disturbance made him appear as a textbook example of a psychopathic personality. Psychopaths are often described as individuals who lack empathy, exhibit manipulative tendencies, and display a profound sense of self-entitlement, all characteristics that Gacy exhibited throughout his life and criminal activities. The legal battle, trial, and conviction. After his arrest and confession, Gacy was charged with 33 counts of murder. The trial began in 1980, and it quickly became one of the most highly publicized cases in U.S. history. The prosecution presented a strong case against Gacy, detailing the evidence found at his home, including the remains of his victims and the chilling details of his confessions. Gacy's defense team tried to argue that he was insane at the time of the killings, claiming that he had suffered from a dissociative identity disorder, which caused him to act in a violent, detached manner. However, the prosecution successfully countered this argument by presenting evidence of Gacy's calculated behavior and his ability to manipulate those around him. They also pointed out the lack of any evidence suggesting that Gacy was not in full control of his actions during the murders. On March 13, 1980, after a trial that lasted several weeks, Gacy was found guilty of all 33 murders. The jury deliberated for just under 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict. The judge, after hearing the full scope of the horrors Gacy had committed, sentenced him to death by lethal injection. The final chapter, execution. John Wayne Gacy's time on death row lasted for over a decade. During this period, he continued to appeal his conviction, but all of his appeals were ultimately rejected. Gacy's last appeal was denied in 1992, and on May 10, 1994, he was executed by lethal injection at the Stateville Correctional Center in Illinois. Gacy's execution was the culmination of years of legal proceedings and a trial that exposed the true horror of his crimes. In his final moments, Gacy maintained his composure, offering a brief statement before being executed. His final words were, "Kiss my ass." John Wayne Gacy's death brought a grim sense of closure to one of the most horrific chapters in the history of American crime. However, his legacy as the killer clown continues to haunt the public consciousness. The nature of his crimes, his ability to deceive those around him, and the chilling way he blended into society make his story one of the most unsettling in the world of true crime. Conclusion: the legacy of John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy's killing spree remains one of the most disturbing in the history of the United States. His ability to maintain a facade of respectability while secretly murdering young men for years is a chilling testament to the darkness that can lie behind even the most polished exteriors. Gacy's crimes not only shocked the nation, but also highlighted the dangers of trust, the vulnerability of marginalized individuals, and the terrifying potential for evil in unexpected places. Through his brutal actions, Gacy left a legacy of fear and confusion, one that still resonates today. His case serves as a reminder that some monsters don't wear masks. They wear the faces of everyday people. Part 4, the aftermath, impact on society, and the search for closure. The aftermath of the investigation, the ongoing search for answers. John Wayne Gacy's arrest and subsequent conviction marked the end of his killing spree, but the emotional and psychological impact of his crimes rippled through his community, the families of his victims, and the nation as a whole. The discovery of Gacy's crimes forced many to reckon with the reality that a man they had trusted and admired had been living among them for years, hiding in plain sight. In the years following Gacy's arrest, the authorities continued to investigate his case, attempting to identify the remaining victims. Gacy's brutal killings and the trauma they caused extended beyond his immediate victims. The families of those he murdered were left searching for answers. Many of the victims were young men from troubled backgrounds or runaways, which meant they were often overlooked by authorities. This unfortunate reality made the identification process even more difficult, as many of the bodies found at Gacy's home remained unidentified for years. The search for answers extended into the years, after Gacy's execution, as forensic teams worked tirelessly to identify all of his victims. While some victims' identities were confirmed through dental records, other remains remained unidentified, leading to years of uncertainty for families who still had unanswered questions. Even today, some of Gacy's victims remain nameless, their families left to wonder about their fates. The emotional toll on the families of Gacy's victims cannot be overstated. Many had been searching for their missing loved ones for years, only to find out that they had been murdered by a man who had been living right under their noses. The pain and suffering experienced by these families are immeasurable, and the quest for justice was far from over after Gacy's conviction. For some, closure never fully came, as they struggled to reconcile the image of the man who had killed their loved ones with the figure Gacy had projected to the outside world. The public's obsession with the killer clown Gacy's case, from the moment it began to unfold, captivated the public's attention. The idea that a man who dressed as a clown and entertainer beloved by children could be responsible for such horrific crimes seemed almost unimaginable to grasp. The killer clown image became iconic in popular culture, symbolizing the duality of Gacy's life: the charming, funny figure who performed at parties and the cold, calculating killer who took the lives of innocent young men. Media outlets were relentless in their coverage of the case, and Gacy became a household name across the United States. Books, documentaries, and films were made about his life and crimes, and the killer clown persona was used as a way to shock and intrigue the public. In many ways, Gacy's crimes became a macabre part of American pop culture, where the line between true crime and entertainment began to blur. This obsession with Gacy's case has sparked important debates about the ethics of turning real-life tragedies into entertainment. While many argue that it is essential to remember and honor the victims of Gacy's crimes, others contend that sensationalizing his persona and story only serves to further victimize those he harmed. The public fascination with Gacy and the way his story has been repackaged for mass consumption raises important questions about how society views and processes the horror of serial crimes. The legacy of Gacy's crimes, lessons for society. John Wayne Gacy's killing spree brought to light many disturbing truths about the vulnerability of society's most marginalized members, the dangers of unchecked trust, and the chilling ability of psychopaths to blend into everyday life. Gacy's ability to live a double life, simultaneously engaging in horrific crimes while maintaining a facade of respectability, served as a terrifying reminder that the most dangerous people can often be the ones who seem the least likely to commit violence. One of the most important lessons that emerged from Gacy's case was the necessity for vigilance within communities. Gacy's crimes went undetected for years, in part because he had established a trusted persona within his neighborhood. His status as a local businessman and his involvement in charity work allowed him to operate without suspicion. The case demonstrated how individuals who may be seen as well-adjusted or even heroic can, in fact, be hiding dark secrets. It highlighted the importance of not taking things at face value, particularly when it comes to the safety and well-being of vulnerable individuals, such as young men, those in need of work, or individuals from troubled backgrounds. The case also led to discussions about how society treats missing persons and marginalized groups. Many of Gacy's victims were runaways or those living in less stable environments, which made them easier targets for Gacy. These young men were often dismissed or overlooked by law enforcement during the early stages of their disappearances. This reflects a larger issue in society, where certain groups, especially those who are economically disadvantaged or homeless, can be dehumanized or ignored, making them more vulnerable to exploitation and violence. Another critical lesson from Gacy's case is the importance of taking action when something feels off or suspicious. Neighbors of Gacy reported strange smells emanating from his house, but these warnings were dismissed. Had people acted on these red flags, perhaps Gacy's reign of terror could have been stopped earlier. The case underscored the importance of community awareness and the need for individuals to speak up when they see something unusual, especially when it involves the safety of others. The psychological impact of Gacy's case. The psychological impact of John Wayne Gacy's crimes on the public and those close to the case has been profound. For the families of his victims, the pain of their loss has been exacerbated by the public nature of the case. Their loved ones were not just victims of a killer, they were also thrust into the spotlight, their deaths becoming part of a national conversation. This level of exposure, while essential for justice, also left many victims' families grappling with the emotional toll of being publicly associated with such a gruesome and sensationalized case. For the general public, Gacy's story served as a reminder of the evil that can exist in the world, hiding in plain sight. The shock and horror of the killer clown captivated the collective imagination of a nation already frightened by the idea of serial killers. His case became a part of the growing true crime culture, and while it sparked important discussions about criminal psychology It also led to a dark fascination with Gacy's persona. Some people were so intrigued by the mystery of Gacy's life that they even created fan communities, analyzing every detail of his life and crimes. However, this obsession with Gacy's story can be damaging. It risks overshadowing the real victims, 33 young men whose lives were brutally taken by a man they had trusted. While Gacy's name has become synonymous with evil, it's important to remember the names of his victims and honor them by ensuring their stories are not overshadowed by the man who killed them. Their lives and their tragic ends should not be lost in the media frenzy surrounding Gacy. Conclusion: the lasting legacy of the killer clown John Wayne Gacy's life and crimes left a permanent scar on American society. His ability to present himself as a respected community member while secretly committing heinous acts serves as a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving. His legacy is one of deception, horror, and loss, but it also carries important lessons for society about trust, awareness, and the need to protect vulnerable individuals. The story of the killer clown is not just a tale of one man's depravity, but a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignoring warning signs and the importance of vigilance within our communities. The true horror of Gacy's crimes lies not only in the murders he committed, but in the fact that he was able to carry them out undetected for so long. The impact of his actions continues to reverberate today, serving as a dark reminder of the complexities of human nature and the depth of evil that can hide beneath the surface. Call to action, CTA, if you want to explore more true crime cases and understand the psychological complexities behind them. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for in-depth analyses and shocking stories. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think we can prevent such tragedies from happening again? Share your ideas with us, and let's keep this conversation going. Remember to like and share this video to spread awareness about the dangers of deception, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more chilling tales from the world of true crime.